Baby Island, Chapter 13. Mr. Peterkin has his ups and downs. After the path was cut through the jungle, Mr. Peterkin became a more and more frequent visitor at the teepee. He had decided to deliver the baby's milk himself, but the girls knew now that it was not entirely because of the milk that he came. They knew that Mr. Peterkin liked their cooking better than his own, and even more, he liked to have Aunt Elizabeth tell him that his beard was pretty. He insisted that Aunt Elizabeth should have the freshest and richest milk, and he nearly always brought some trinket for her, which he himself had carved. Once Mr. Peterkin's hard heart had started to soften, it was just like ice cream in the sun. He began to carry the twins pickaback or ride them cock horse on his knee, and Jonah was allowed to chew his gold watch chain. Even Mary and Jean came in for a good share of his kindliness. Naturally, he still grumbled a good deal and pretended to be angry with them all. But after all, one can't throw off the habits of years in a moment. As the girls often remarked, Aunt Elizabeth was probably the cutest baby ever seen. She was plump and dimpled, with shiny curls that stood up all the wrong way on the back of her head and big blue eyes. But it was very much looked as if her fatal beauty had made her lazy. She only had to smile, or point, or whimper, to have people running to bring her a drink, or a banana, or to lift her up and carry her about. So it had never seemed necessary to her to learn to walk. When she wanted to do a bit of exploring by herself, she went on all fours like Prince Charlie. This had begun to worry Mary. Here was Jonah with new teeth, and Aunt Elizabeth still could not walk. "Do you think it's possible she's weak in the knees?" she asked Mr. Peterkin one day when he was calling. Not my Lizzie," said the gentleman indignantly. "She's so contented," sighed Mary. "Look here," said Mr. Peterkin. "You need some kind of contraption for her. A baby walker, that's what it is." "A baby walker?" "Yeah, that's what it is," repeated the honest seaman. "Maggie and Henry had one for their 12. Blimey, I'll make you one." "It won't hurt her, will it?" asked Mary cautiously. "Me hurt Lizzie?" shouted Mr. Peterkin. "What did you think?" So Mr. Peterkin constructed a beautiful baby walker out of tough vines, a couple of boards, and a piece of canvas sail. It was something like a swing and was suspended from the branch of a tree at such a height that Aunt Elizabeth's feet could easily touch the ground without having to hold up the whole weight of her own body. She pranced around delightedly, and the whole thing seemed to be a huge success. "Well, that's some good to come out of Henry and Maggie anyway," remarked Jean, as she admired Mr. Peterkin's handiwork. But there were others who were not so pleased. Pink and Blue stood looking on, and it was more than they could bear to see Aunt Elizabeth the center of all eyes. "Ba-ba-bye-bye too," said Blue. "Ba-ba-fwing," added Pink. Their lower lips began to droop lower and lower, trembling piteously. Large tears rolled silently down their cheeks. A more pathetic sight would have been difficult to imagine. "But you already know how to walk, twinsies," said Mary sensibly. "Ba-ba go bye-bye too," persisted Blue. "Ba-ba-fwing," wept Pink. Their lower lips continued to droop further and farther, and suddenly they let out twin howls that echoed dismally through the jungle. "It's no use trying to persuade them once they've made up their minds," said Mary. "I guess you'll just have to build 2 more baby walkers, Mr. Peterkin." Mr. Peterkin behaved very nicely indeed. With scarcely a murmur, he went to work, and before the day was over, the delighted twins were dangling in baby walkers too. Jean and Prince Charlie had looked on with interest all the while that Mr. Peterkin worked. "And now," said Jean politely when the 3 baby walkers were finished, "would you please make one for Charlie?" "How's that?" "A baby walker for Charlie, please." "For that monkey?" "If you please." "Sliver me timbers," yelled Mr. Peterkin, "and strike me red, white, and blue if you catch me making a baby walker for a monkey. No, sir, no baby walkers for no monkeys. What's he got his tail for, may I ask?" So Charlie never got his baby walker, and it must be admitted that the twins soon tired of theirs. But Aunt Elizabeth's legs were greatly strengthened and benefited by hers. One day she was sitting on the tarpaulin outside of the teepee when she saw Mr. Peterkin coming through the jungle with his milk, and, raising on unsteady legs, she took her very first steps to meet him. Mr. Peterkin thought that was the smartest thing a baby had ever been known to do. After a while, even Mary got a little tired of hearing Mr. Peterkin tell about it. "Of course, all babies learn to walk sometime," she said sensibly. "I suppose you did the same thing yourself when you were a baby, or you'd still be going around on all fours." "But look here," cried Mr. Peterkin. "The little beggar, she walked to me, she did. It weren't just an ordinary first step. She got right up and came a-walking to me. And pity, she says, a-reaching for my chin. Pity." Jean had some hopes of finding out what was in Mr. Peterkin's chest now that he had grown so tender-hearted. On one of her cleaning days, she baked Mr. Peterkin a beautiful pie, full of sliced bananas and pieces of coconut whipped up with gull's eggs and sugar. It seemed like a wonderful mixture to Jean, and all she needed was a bit of flavoring, but unfortunately she couldn't find either vanilla or nutmeg in Mr. Peterkin's cupboard. However, there was plenty of garlic, and knowing that this was the honest seaman's favorite flavor, Jean put it in with a lavish hand. The pie came out of the oven a beautiful golden brown, and when Jean set it before Mr. Peterkin at luncheon, she felt that this was the very moment to ask him about his chest. Said Mr. Peterkin, rubbing his hands together with delight and preparing to plunge his knife into the pie. "Blow me down if that ain't a tart, and what a tart at that!" "Mr. Peterkin," asked Jean hurriedly, "sometime will you let me see what's in your chest? Really, I think I ought to clean it out for you. You know moths might get in, or rust, or corrupt. May I?" "Well, now, little Jeanie," began Mr. Peterkin amiably, raising the first forkful of pie to his lips. Yes, said Jeanie eagerly. But at the first taste of the pie, Mr. Peterkin's eyes suddenly started from his head. He gave a loud, strangling cough and started for the door. This was a very bad omen indeed. Jean sniffed at the pie, and it did smell strongly of garlic. But after all, if that was Mr. Peterkin's favorite flavor... "No," roared Mr. Peterkin, "don't you never look at that chest no-how, do you hear? And mind you fed that tart to the goats and gulls before I get back." Away went Mr. Peterkin into the jungle. Only one thing was clear to Jean. There was something about the combination of bananas, coconut, sugar, and garlic that brought out the worst in a reformed man. That was the second no she had had out of Mr. Peterkin, and it proved to Jean that the battle wasn't entirely won yet. She looked wistfully at the brass-bound chest and wondered if it were lost forever. It was about this time that Mary consulted her calendar one day and saw that Christmas was approaching. "We haven't any place to hang our stockings," said Jean. "Oh, we can fix something. We must have a real Christmas for the baby's sake. It would be awful if they grew up without knowing about Christmas. And we can make presents for them, too. And, Mary, let's give Mr. Peterkin and Halford presents." "Why, of course," said Mary. "What did you think?" After that, the teepee buzzed with the mystery and excitement. The girls were busy making presents out of clam and coconut shells, palm leaves, moss, clay, and sticks, anything they could find which gave them an idea for a gift. What's this? Inquired Mr. Peterkin, arriving one day with his milk while they were in the middle of their preparations. "Oh, Mr. Peterkin, it's for Christmas," said Mary, and Jean sang. "We live on an island, and not on an isthmus. We can have Christmas and Christmas and Christmas." "Christmas," said Mr. Peterkin. "Blow me down. I had forgotten there was such." He kept saying over and over, "Christmas, strike me pink." And before he left that day, he invited them all to his house to hang up their stockings over his stove and to eat Christmas dinner from his table. "But no garlic in the pudding," he warned. Jean blushed, but naturally Mary paid no attention to such a silly remark. "I'm so glad," she said. "I want the babies to get used to things as they are at home, and Christmas in a tent is rather odd." "Thank you, Mr. Peterkin." "Don't mention it, miss," said Mr. Peterkin, and Jean added sensibly, "Christmas is nice anywhere, Mary."